Have you ever felt like you're asking for way too much in your relationship? Or like you just don't get why they can't step up and treat you the way you want? Sometimes it's hard to tell if it's you or if it's them, and that's what we're getting into today. I'm going to talk about how to know when you're asking for too much, why you're probably not, and I'll share scripts for making requests in relationships without making your partner feel criticized. Welcome back to Dating Intentionally. I'm Talia. I'm sharing no nonsense advice for navigating modern dating with confidence and ease, whether you've been on dozens of dates or you're just getting started. I believe dating can be fun. Today's episode was inspired by a question I got through my question service. I haven't talked about this ever on the podcast, but because I get so many questions on Instagram and in my inbox, I can't answer them all, even though I really, really want to. So I do have a service where you can submit a question and I will answer within a day. It's $20 and I get back to you within 24 hours on weekdays. The link to that lives in my Instagram bio, and my handle is dating.intentionally, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. This service is for those times when your dilemma or question involves paragraphs of backstory and detail, and I never share them on the podcast or on social media. So I'm not sharing the original submission that inspired this episode, but I got this question yesterday that made me realize how passionate I am about this topic, and I wanted to get into it. So here's a scenario. Maybe you're newly dating someone, maybe you've been dating them for years, and you feel like your needs aren't being met in some way. But whenever you bring it up, it seems to backfire. Maybe you are the one who ends up apologizing. Maybe they pull back even more or make you feel guilty for asking. Or maybe they honor your request for a week or two and then it just goes back to what it was before. And then you're left still feeling unsatisfied and wondering, am I asking for too much? I'm going to spill the tea right now. The right person for you isn't going to make you feel like you're asking for too much. Of course, there is a line, and I do want to get into signs that you may be asking for too much, and then I will get into signs that you are definitely not. So, here's how you know you might be asking for too much in your relationships. The first one is that you keep moving the goalposts. So, what does this mean? This means that you make requests and then they do work to honor it, like they are actually putting an effort to honor it, but it's not good enough or it's not the exact way you envision. So, you move the goalpost, right? You're like, actually, this is what I want. No, actually, this is what I want. That is a sign you are asking for too much. Like, we do need to meet people halfway and recognize when they are putting an effort, even if it's not executed perfectly. It's like, okay, they are stepping up. Another one is that you expect them to meet all your needs. So, we've talked about needs a lot in this podcast. And basically, if you expect someone to meet all of your needs, you are asking for too much. No one can meet all of your social, emotional, and intellectual needs. You are also going to meet some of your needs yourself in your relationship, and you'll get your needs met from other relationships like friendships and family relationships outside your relationship. So, yes, your partner should definitely meet some of your needs, but no one can meet all of your needs. Another one is when you're not paying attention to what they are doing and only focusing on what they're not doing. This is a very easy trap to fall into, and I'm definitely guilty of this. Like, I've definitely done this. So, if you are only paying attention to what's missing and not looking at the big picture of what they're doing, you might be asking for too much because it's very possible that your person is stepping up in some way, but you're hyper fixating on like one other small way they are not showing up that you need. Your needs are valid. Don't get me wrong, but we also have to zoom out and make sure we're paying attention to the full picture. You may be asking for too much when they feel like they are not able to have their independence. So, you're asking for too much if you make a big fuss when your partner goes to hang out with their friends or, wants to hang out with their family without you, or like just something that it's just for them, like their hobbies and they're just doing it on their own. If they feel like they need to tiptoe around this or like they can't do it without asking you for your permission, I think you're asking for too much. Like in a relationship, we are allowed to have our independent lives, and that's actually a sign of a healthy relationship. Of course, there's a balance, right? You want to feel prioritized, but you also want to make sure your partner can have their own life outside your relationship because your relationship isn't their whole life. Like that's not the point of a relationship. So just making sure that you are both have space to explore your independence and hobbies and interests and relationships outside of your romantic connection. If they tell you that they feel like you're asking for too much, then that's a sign, right? When you expect them to fix all of their flaws for you, definitely asking for too much there. I mean, we all have flaws, and I don't think it's right to be like, hey, I need you to fix this thing for me. I need you to, meet this standard of mine. Like, some people just can't do that. Some people aren't wired that way. So, an example of wanting someone to fix their flaws for you is this. Let's just say you're dating someone and they are someone who likes to make plans last minute. That's how they've operated their whole life. And you are asking them to make plans a week or like a couple days ahead, and they're just being like, "That's not how I operate," and you're like, "Well, I need this." And it's like, you just sometimes you can't bridge that gap. By the way, I'm not saying that asking for plans to be made in advance is asking for too much. You are just asking that of the wrong person sometimes, right? And expecting them to become the person that you want when they're just not, right? There is a level of acceptance in relationships that we need to tolerate. We need to accept people for who they are rather than trying to change them. So at a certain point, what you are asking would mean that person needs to change for you. And that is when you're asking for too much. So let's talk about the other side when you are not asking for too much. Like we are for sure not asking for too much. The first thing is when you want consistency and to be able to rely on someone. That is the bare minimum. Okay. That is the bare minimum of relationships. Wanting consistency, like wanting that level of trust in your relationship where you know you're going to hear from them, where you're going to see them on a consistent basis. That is the bare minimum. You are not asking for too much. The second one is you want to know where you stand. Okay. You want to know where this relationship is going, how they feel about you. That is not asking for too much. Absolutely not. Again, this is another bare minimum thing. And some people will make you feel like you are asking for too much, unfortunately, but I'm telling you, you are not. You want to define the relationship. Again, that is just part of being in a long term relationship. Definitely not asking for too much. You want to feel heard. You want to spend time with them. That, like, wanting to be with your person, just spending time together on dates, hanging out, whatever. That, again, bare minimum. You need to be able to spend time with the person you're dating. If they are not willing to give you time, they don't make time for you, you're not asking for too much. They're just not available, right? Big difference there. If you want to have physical intimacy regularly, whatever that looks like for you, whether that's cuddling, sex, hand holding, hugging, it's normal to want physical intimacy regularly in a relationship. Again, we all have different needs and tolerances for that, like totally cool, but you are not asking for too much if you want regular sex, regular hugs, regular cuddles. Like that is totally fair. And finally, you want clear communication. I mean, who wouldn't want that? That is not asking for too much, but some people just are not capable of that, right? So that just because someone isn't capable of something doesn't mean you are asking for too much. I also think it's important just to point out here that it's important to be able to give what you are asking for. So if you want direct communication, then it's only fair that you have the skills to communicate directly as well. If you want to feel heard, make sure you are doing the work to make them feel heard. If you want them to make time for you, make sure you're making time for them. It's all a two-way street here. And I'm sure if you're listening to this, you are the person who shows up in their relationships, but I want to make sure that you're not just focusing on them and you're also focusing on what you are doing in the relationship. My heart hurts for folks who write to me and tell me they feel like they're going crazy because they feel like they're asking for too much because their partner is incapable or unwilling to give to them. And then there is this idea that you can change their behavior by changing yours. And I've so been there. I'm sure if you're listening, you can relate. Maybe you feel like you need to pull back and disengage to match their energy so that they will like suddenly step up. And sometimes that feels like it's the only option with someone who isn't giving you the affection and consistency you crave. And I just want to say, if you're feeling like that, I see you. It's really frustrating. And I really hope that this episode can help. I want to talk about my personal experience for a second. So, in my relationship, there are things that I have had to ask for, but my husband has never made me feel like it was too much. Sometimes he doesn't understand things. Like I've had to explain several times in conflict that it's important to address the emotions before we get into solutions. That is not too much to ask, but sometimes it can be hard to put into practice. And it requires patience on my end because I know that validating emotions and showing empathy before jumping into solving a problem is not something my husband naturally does. He has to put effort and work to do that. And the same is true for many men in my experience with this specific example. That's not asking for too much. Just because he has to try doesn't mean I'm asking for too much. Sometimes we do ask too much of the wrong people, but in this example, wanting to relate before we resolve, I know is not too much, even though he does struggle with it. It's like on my end, I have compassion for that. And on his end, he's putting the work in. And it's not always going to be perfect. This is kind of back to what I said about moving the goalposts. Like I can see him trying and he knows it's important to me. He understands why that is important, but he won't always get it right. And that doesn't mean I'm asking too much and it doesn't mean that he's incapable. It's just like part of being human and part of being in a relationship. It just gets messy sometimes. But I want you to have that same level of certainty in your relationships that you're not asking for too much. But you need to recognize earlier when you are asking for too much from someone who is not capable of meeting you where you're at, of meeting your needs. And I want to repeat this, it doesn't have anything to do with them doing something on purpose to trigger you, right? Maybe you've had a discussion. It's like, hey, I need more texting or I want to see you more. And then they are dropping the ball on that. They're not doing that intentionally, they're not doing that maliciously. That's just how they act. That's just how they are, no matter who they date. It's not because you're not good enough. It's not because you're not pretty enough or make enough money or whatever it is, like whatever. It's not because you're missing something. They're not capable of meeting you where you're at. So that's why it's important to not internalize their lack of ability to meet your needs as you asking for too much or you not being good enough. So, when it comes to asking for things, I want to get into how do we ask? What is the best way to make requests in our relationships? And I've done several podcast episodes on needs and how to get them met. So, definitely go back and listen to those. I'll link the main one in the show notes. But I'm a big fan of having some scripts for this. And again, I'm going to say these scripts, it's not going to be perfect when you try them out, but like, here's an example. In a relationship, it's really important that I feel X. When you do Y, it makes me feel so X. I'd love to see more of Y from you. What do you think? Let's fill in the blanks, okay? So here's a script with an example. In a relationship, it's really important to me that I feel heard. When you repeat back to me in your words what I'm saying, it makes me feel like you're hearing me, not just listening, which you're already so good at. I'd love to try this next time I bring something to your attention. What do you think? Here's another version. In our relationship, it's really important that I feel like we're spending quality time together. When you're not on your phone, I feel so connected and in the moment with you, and I love that. I'd love it if next time we're at dinner, we just keep our phones off the table the whole time, even if we want to Google something. What do you think? These work because they're positive and specific. You're not telling them, I hate when you're on your phone or you never make me feel heard. What you're saying is what you like, why it's important, and you're making specific requests that relate to what you want to feel below the surface. This isn't just like a transaction like please like text me more. It's why does more texting make you feel good? Your partner is going to want to make you feel good, right? So you have to give them that why. I'd also like to throw in some acknowledgement or appreciation when making these requests because oftentimes when we ask something of our partner, they get into a defensive mode and bring up something like, well, last time we watched a movie, I didn't have my phone, or what do you mean? I always let you talk and I listen. It's good to share that you notice their efforts and then also share what adjustments you need to feel the way you want to feel. So I want to get into the communication one a bit because it's so common, like, this comes up so much, like, in early dating, we wanna ask for more texting and communication between dates and just keeping in touch in general, and this is a tricky one. I've touched on it before in other episodes, but here is my take. I think in early dating, you're gonna be better off finding someone who naturally matches your energy in texting or accepting that some people just aren't going to text as much as you. You can 100% let someone know you prefer more texting between dates. When I was on the apps, I would bring up texting shortly after trading numbers with someone new. I'd say, I'd like texting, but it's okay if you don't. Kind of giving them the green light to text me, but without putting the pressure on. Most people were like, yeah, I like texting too, and it was fine. And some people were like, I'm not a huge texter, but I'm happy to chat here and there. And that was the extent of it. My general stance on this is that texting isn't dating. And yet, by the time you're living with someone, it doesn't matter. But I can't deny the importance of keeping in touch between dates to keep that momentum up. So don't feel like you're asking for too much if you want a quick daily check in the early dating phase, but recognize that some people just aren't going to do that. And it's not because you're not good enough and it's not because they don't like you. Some people just don't do that. And if you need that, that's okay. I would recommend to keep dating until you find someone who is a good enough texter where your anxiety isn't triggered like crazy. I want to throw some compassion your way if you feel like you have been asking for too much in your relationships. Some of us have grown up in environments where our needs weren't met or tended to properly, and that might make you feel like any ask is going to be too much. But for the right person, it's not going to be too much, I promise. Either they will naturally be able to show up as the consistent and communicative partner you're looking for, or when you ask, they will get it and do their best to step up. It's your job to communicate your needs. It's your job to know what they are. Trust that you're not asking for too much and pay attention to what they're doing rather than what's missing all the time. It's normal to have needs, and having needs does not make you needy. So, I want to throw a couple reflection questions your way just to think about this, right? Like, to navigate this feeling of, am I asking for too much? The first one is, what are my needs, right? Go back and drill down on your non negotiable needs. What do you need to feel safe, loved, and valued? The person you end up with might not do it perfectly, but at the bare minimum, what do you need to feel safe, valued, and loved? The second question is, how can I clearly and directly communicate my needs without criticizing? So, my scripts are great, but there are so many different ways that you can directly say, "Hey, I want to feel this way, so this is what I need from you." That is kind of just the bare bones of a request that will focus on what you want, not what they're doing wrong, which will help them feel less criticized. Another question to reflect on is, have I explicitly said what I need? Your partner isn't a mind reader, so it's hard, if you're like feeling, am I asking for too much? But the question is, have you actually asked? Like, have you actually said, I need this? Because your partner isn't going to automatically know. And I don't want you to get stuck in this trap of like, well, they should just know to text me every day. Some people don't know. Some people just aren't as experienced, or they just don't need the same things as you. So they just don't do that, right? They're not you. So make sure that you are being explicit. The fourth question is, am I focusing on how they're treating me? So again, stay grounded, look at their actions, zoom out. What are they doing? Are they planning dates? Are they present on dates with you? Are they asking questions? Do they show that they care about you? And how are they showing that? Maybe it's not the exact way you want, but are they showing that, and how are they doing that? The fifth one is, am I letting them show me who they are? So it goes back to the original question that inspired this episode, which is like, and maybe in the beginning, this person's all lovey dovey and it's amazing and like they're super consistent, and then something happens and they go hot and cold on you. We can't just focus on how good the beginning was and ignore what's happening now, the hot and cold behavior. So I think that this question is meant to help you really see the whole picture. Like, okay, maybe in the beginning there were this, but what are they doing now? How are they acting now? How are they treating you now? What are they showing you now? That is a little bit more important than how it was when you first met. All right. I hope this helped. I am excited to hear your feedback. Once again, you can always connect with me on Instagram at dating.intentionally, or shoot me an email at datingintentionallypod@gmail.com. I love hearing from you. By the way, you can ask me short, quick questions. Always answer if I can. But if there is that longer backstory in your question, then you should definitely use the service, which is linked below, and I'll get back to you within a day. All right, let's do a quick dating dilemma. Thank you to everyone who has submitted these dilemmas. By sharing your story, you are helping other people because they might be going through the same thing. So thank you for your vulnerability. All right. I, 34 female, was dating a guy, 36 male, for around 5 weeks. We had 5 dates, all sleepovers, and multiple days. We connected on a deep and fun level, and both said we felt very safe together and valued what we were learning, and we appreciated each other's open and kind communication styles. I found out he had been dating someone else, but much more casually. He said their connection wasn't as good, and I asked for exclusivity. He said he wasn't sure because it felt so right. I'm one of his favorite people he's ever met, and he feels most himself around me so quickly. But we ended it because I wasn't happy with his perfection mindset, because he said he thinks if it's right, it's right, and that he had a feeling something wasn't right and that it might be self sabotage. Okay. We missed each other, and after 2 weeks apart, we're trying again. He's told me he's no longer dating this other person, but no exclusivity conversation yet, apart from me asking if he was currently seeing anyone else, to which he said no. How can I settle my anxiety? Can I date others to not put all my eggs in one basket, or would that be a sick move after our previous time and me asking him his current situation? I want to see him, but feel super vulnerable and also unsure about him. But I love being around him and really appreciate how he's handled himself in some of our tough conversations. Okay, let's unpack this. So, you've dated just over a month. You've had 5 sleepover dates in that time. So, 1 date a week, but they're longer. So, because they're sleepovers. It seems like you've had a lot of open and honest conversations and you've connected quickly. And then you hit a point where exclusivity came up and he hesitated for some reason that you believe is self sabotage in the form of perfectionism. Definitely a red flag. I agree. 2 weeks later, you're back at it and he's not seeing this other person. So you asked, how can you settle your anxiety? Well, first step I take here is to be very clear on what you want. You didn't mention in your submission, and I'm going to assume you've discussed relationship goals here, but make sure you are very clear on why you are dating right now, that you want to find someone to commit to long term. Is he on the same page? And when you do have this conversation, lay out exactly what that looks like to you. Not everyone thinks of a relationship the same way. Like, what does it mean to you? What does a relationship look like? You're only seeing each other, you're seeing each other often, and you're progressing in the relationship, meaning you're getting closer and having experiences together and integrating your lives, right? Make sure you really lay out what that looks like. I don't think it would be a good move at this point for you to start seeing other people just to manage your anxiety, especially when you've expressed that you want exclusivity. That is not aligning your actions with your desires here. Another red flag I noticed is that he said you're his favorite person he's ever met and that it feels so right, but not right enough to commit. This, to me, is giving unintentional love bombing, meaning he might be trying to get you for his own validation, but not intentionally trying to manipulate you, which is something love bombers do. I highly recommend listening to my love bombing versus genuine interest episode, which is number 31. No matter what, my advice here is to make sure that your actions and words align with what you ultimately want. If he can't match you and meet you there, then it's time to move on, even if the connection is amazing. Unfortunately, a strong connection isn't enough. Both people need to be willing to take that leap together into commitment, and you deserve that. All right, I hope that helps. Please keep me updated, by the way. I would love to hear an update on this one. And I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for trusting me. I hope that this episode helped you reframe the idea of asking for too much because you're probably not. And don't forget, you're doing great. I love it if you share this episode with someone who is navigating dating and might need a little confidence boost or some tough love. If any of these episodes have helped you in your journey, you can help me by leaving a stunning review on Apple or giving Dating Intentionally 5 stars on Spotify. I'd really appreciate it. Once again, I'm Talia. This has been Dating Intentionally, and I'll catch you next time.